Thank you all for coming, family and friends. I want to start by acknowledging what I'm sure we all feel, which is that my dad left us too soon, too sudden. Like how the first hard frost feels when it comes and takes the zinnias and dahlias that are still in full bloom. He loved those flowers. He loved plants. He filled himself with their energy and was so full of life, even to the very end. It was hard to believe he was really leaving. But just like the garden, everything physical eventually dies. It must be given back to the earth and composted. And all of the gold that is born of this cycling of life and death is what makes the flowers brighter and taller. The greens greener and wider. Everything is divine and everything is divinely timed. It is very healing to trust in this. We all deserve to be healthy and free. Today is a celebration of the man my dad was and how we have all been deeply affected by him. As I've been reflecting these past few weeks on what to say about this brilliant man who was my father, what shines brightly amidst all his gifts and joys is his authenticity and devotion to truth. He had such a strong vision of how he wanted to live in service to humanity and the earth, a steward and protector, a virtuous being, always connected to the source of all things. It was this vision and integrity that brought him up north, splitting with my mom and taking me with him, protecting, committed to the truth despite the pain and loneliness, driving us north, me in the front seat, him crying all the way. Not what he wanted to do, what he felt he had to do. This was my dad. So fierce, so brave and determined, connected to his vision. We met Susan in a natural food store in Boston a couple days later. She was helping to look after me as he stocked up on bags of grains and beans and all the macro staples. I was 18 months old. We headed back to his friend Johnsky's house where we were staying. And while he was recounting his serendipitous encounter with this kind and beautiful woman he'd met at the store, I was busy trying to kiss the dog under the dining table. And the dog, who apparently didn't like what I was doing, bit me twice on my face, and we were off to the emergency room and then the surgeon to stitch me back together. And somewhere in there, the Rolling Stones song, Let It Bleed, was playing on the radio. It seems that everything my dad did was epic. He was an incredible healer, devoted beyond measure to his work and the people who were drawn to it. And the people came from far and wide. I remember vividly the moment it really hit me that I was going to study with my dad someday, if only to not let his art of healing die with him. Since he worked from home, first out of the house and later building the clinic, I witnessed countless miracles of people resurrected from their plight of imminent disability, unable to work with their hands or bend their knees, to build houses, to play music, to paint, to grow flowers. My dad worked on so many artists. He loved artists of all kinds. He himself was an artist of many kinds. He was the most passionate, intoxicated gardener I've ever known. His garden was like a painting, new every year as he rotated vegetable beds and planted his seeds, from rutabaga to rudbeckia, thinning and transplanting the volunteers all around until he got it just right. A dance he did with the earth each spring, summer, and fall. He was truly a green man, if ever there was one, and his vegetables were off the charts. I'm sure all of you have witnessed this at least once or twice. A cabbage the size and weight of a large bowling ball, or a daikon the length of a baseball bat. Kale and collard leaves double or triple their normal size. He would be so proud and full of joy, like a child showing off his prized possessions. He grew amazing vegetables that few even know about, like scorzonera, black radish, Siberian kale, turnip greens, and his beloved chicoria, pan di zucchero, and all of its sweet, bitter friends. This extraordinary salad green that he first met in Vigolo Vataro was the inspiration for the infamous green mash, later known simply as mash. And speaking of food, he not only grew the amazing vegetables, but he was such an inspired creator in the kitchen and loved to manifest beauty for all the senses with his food. Sweetheart, you have to wait till Mom is done. Okay? Then we'll have milk. So much of what he did, I also do. In my own way, of course. I can't live without gardens all around me, nor can I help but grow and tend and harvest and preserve and dry and save and seed again. In the kitchen, too, I sometimes begrudge my upbringing that ingrained in me all the benefits of making one's own food, always without compromise. I know, sweetheart, I have to do this first, okay? And then we'll have milk. You can go sit with Poppy. It's the only way to know exactly what you're making your physical self of. And now that I'm a mother, I feel the value of these practices so profoundly. They are simple, yet they are everything. There isn't much that I do in my life that isn't strongly connected to my dad. Raising my girls has enabled me to see my raising in a whole new way and reflect on all the things that my dad and Susan did for us kids. One of the most valuable gifts they gave us was the environment in which to cultivate a strong and lasting connection with the earth. The homestead in Otis they created is a true healing place, a sanctuary with gardens and the wild all around, a real clean, green healing machine. We were just far enough away from town that we could never really get lost in that busyness. I want to read this poem, For the Children by Gary Snyder. It's been a recurring poem in my life and actually first appeared as part of my birth announcement back in Florida, which I didn't know until a few years ago. For the children. The rising hills, the slopes of statistics lie before us. The steep climb of everything going up, as we all go down. In the next century, or the one beyond that, they say, our valleys, pastures, we can meet there in peace if we make it. To climb these coming crests, one word to you and your children. Stay together, learn the flowers. Go light. Stay together, learn the flowers, go light. My dad really lived by those commandments, living and leading by example, a virtuous, prosperous, respectful, and respectable life. He was a lover of beauty, a lover of music, of song and of dance, a lover of the word, spoken and unspoken, encrypted but unbroken. He found spirit in everything, and he put his voice in his poems. Here's one he wrote when I first traveled to Italy to study abroad. It's wild to reflect on everything that was set in motion by this one adventure. The lasting friendships that were made, the deep connections to people and place and traditions of old. This is called First Parting for Sarah. You will leave here, daughter, these well-worn snowy hills, this old warm wooden home for some higher ranges, with earthen dwellings on older continents. You will eat the roots of foreign gardens, the brown breads and wine of ancient vineyards. You will converse and solve the riddles of the day in old world tempered tongue. Endearing friendships will find you, even love. But never fret nor fear, for this one, your father, who reaches far for you, through these long blue shadows, knowing only one word, the word I have lived with almost all of my life, whose nights are full of moons, whose days of creation, whose seasons of birth and death bring forth the great abundance. I never set out to be the earth's greatest lover. She seduced me with her bountiful bosom. Let her embrace you too, show you the roads to Rome and then the road back home. Well, I did go to Rome and I did come back home. Whenever I've stayed away, I've always returned to my roots, to the truth, to the earth, and to God. My dad knew how to live well, and I'm eternally grateful to have been his daughter. I'm going to end with another poem of his, a beautiful, epic nugget of gold. This one's called Sweeping Before Solstice. Brunello and baby Rollo were sweeping the garden. Bright day that it was, full of sweet whiff and flutterings. They were sweeping the garden paths and sweeping the garden beds, up and down and to and fro. Brunello in his tall humor was sweeping westerly, from the south side of the garden to the north, including the flowers of imagination. Baby Rollo, wide-eyed and wild-haired, was sweeping the eastern edge of things, from the north side of the garden to the south, taking great care of the roots of culture. They were sweeping away the debris and the unwanted weeds, sweeping away excessive desires and the seeds of sinister power. They were sweeping away the flags and the borders, sweeping away the churches, synagogues, and mosques, sweeping away the constitutions and the scriptures, and all the superfluous, strangly vines of the mind. Even terror and fear they were whisking away into the morning mist, preparing for the fresh planting. Goldfinch had returned to the bush, and the bush was still bigger than all of us, thankfully. That cold-hearted old troll, still resisting going back into his cold hole, sticking his icy middle finger out several times before the goddess overwhelmed him in green. Hummingbird was working down at the dictaminus plant, now since things got scarce up at the Rhodes, and the ant clan was working up at peonies to get them ready to open for the show. And Brunello and baby Rollo were sweeping up the garden paths, sweeping down the garden beds, sweeping in the garden gates, and sweeping out the garden skies, gesturing with their long, prolific brooms, as if laying down verse amongst the verdancy, as if sweeping from one poem to another. And in fact, they were, possessed by the goddess herself, and speaking in one tongue and in all tongues. And in the voice of the young muse, Bony Oscar, gave forth thusly, of two. Holding counsel with the great goddess, I pondered on the theme of two, and fell immediate between less of a cliche and much ado. Whence I dreamed of dragonfly heavens, where the once colorless drag nymphs hauled themselves from the muds unleavened, teetered and then bravely went, on wings of wonderment and hunger, fueled by destiny and instinct, seeking meadows of thunder and ponds of great sex and offsprings. O life, we're born, we eat, and we die. What could be more simple, more true? Portending enlightenment belies that all we are came from these two. That alone, she's strong and beautiful, but needs soft pillows and mirrors. And alone, he's irrefutable, creator, but needs an anchor. Dragon queen, dragon king, let's away. We're off to find a bite to eat, and then we'll couple in summer shade. Chrysalis left in our retreat. Thank you.
That was really beautiful. You and your dad were a tough act to follow, to say the least. And you covered so much. I'll see if I can find a little corner that you didn't. Thanks, everybody, for being here. It's amazing. I want to proceed by taking the liberty to do for Richard what he was unable to do yesterday, and that's wish my wife, Carol, a happy birthday. As it's probably the first one of Carol's birthday that Richard has missed in all the years we knew him. And as he faithfully and religiously celebrated birthdays, especially amongst our two couples, since the kids were off doing their lives, the four of us would always go someplace special for dinner, usually raiding our wine cellars for a couple of treasures to take, and the only exception being if the Fab Four was playing within 2 or 3 hours, then forget it. He wouldn't show up. But of course that would mean that Susan wouldn't show up either, so I can't just blame Richard. Given all the obstacles confronting us at this time we're living, I'm really grateful we found a way to come together here to celebrate Richard and the profound life that he crafted. Looking back on Richard, the 40 years I knew him, it's easy to think that he had an exact vision of what he wanted at every moment, and that he would go after it with what we all knew as his limitless energy and unfaltering will. But I felt for him it was a dance, whether a sign in the morning sky, a twist of words from a fellow muse, how the frost had reformed the wilting wildflowers along the path to the clinic that lifted and lilted his step. Whether it be molding clay, layering compost, putting words together, or making new ones, a new flower in the arrangement, the tokonoma of found objects, magic in the kitchen. He got so lit up by the possibilities he found at any given moment. His revelry left us all in a spell. One could hardly walk into the clinic, the temple that he loved, without being awed, silent by the immense and varied palette of his spirit. I was often the first treatment on Tuesday, especially the last few years, as he always had Rick, the DJ from WKZE from Red Hook, on the radio delivering his trademark "Today's Good News," which was not only surprising that there actually was some good news, but even more shocking to realize how unused we were to hearing any. Richard and I would hunker into Rick's familiar interviews with notable local and far-flung musicians, many who were to be playing in the area that weekend coming. It often wasn't long before Richard would suddenly break the silence with, "Hey bro, what do you think? Why don't you check and see if we can get 4 tickets to that Saturday night?" As soon as I was back on my feet and dressed, I would. This, of course, the ritual because I had the device and he didn't, and famously wouldn't. I think even Carol and Susan came to almost expect that something good for the weekend would come out of my Tuesday treatment. I know we all have some similar stories of our own, the gems he's left in our memories. In these past couple months, searching what often feels like a broken record for explanations, I felt maybe RZ opted out when he did, partly for reasons of these times that have befallen us. He was also always so deeply offended by what has become the currency of our time. The half-truths, the full lies, the convolutions, deceptions. He wanted none of it. Nonetheless, for many of us, Richard's passing is a mystery that doesn't make sense. One could hardly find in all our friends and acquaintances anyone who had taken better care of themselves. But as we all know too well, so many mysteries go unanswered. Mysteries, contradictions, twists of fate, all stepping stones we navigate on our journeys, not knowing just which ones will carry us over the dangerously rushing stream. But the Richard of whom we are certain and how he made his journey left us all unforgettably touched, both figuratively and, for the luckiest of us, literally. Touch. His remarkable work was undoubtedly his most honed craft, of which there were many. It was in his hands he simultaneously sensed and selflessly gave back, by which we were all made hopefully better, and at least more attuned to ourselves. I'm going to finish reading a poem written by a mutual friend, John Farner, who with his wife Roseanne were part of a community living in Jamaica Plain in the early 80s. Drawn to one another with visions to make ourselves more whole and the world a better place. The poem's called Terms, his. On a humid southern wind, a friend arrived with baby and hands that embraced. The powerful caress expanded, kneading his proof, grinding gamasio, and soon pulling extraordinary daikon. Soil of Otis, water of spectacle, fuel into Vermont casting. The sound of jazz, the written poetic word, the stories of so many visitors. An expanding family and community, given to all with consuming, unrelenting effort. Results, much like the weather, varied, glorious, ominous. Rain clouds, brilliant sunshine, the frost, humid heat, and the deep freeze. A cauldron fermenting efforts beyond that of a single man. And John added this reflection as an epilogue. Over the recent past, thinking of Richard's passing, one hard to imagine, I pictured a transition as I walked through the garden in a deep, misty, indeterminate season, whereupon I see in the distance a receding old man. What I find in my approach is a long past parsnip who informs me, "You missed him. That season's over. But oh, there were some good ones." So I'm going to pass the torch on to Carol. And I just want to say thank you to all the people that helped put this together, the musicians who come and who we're yet to feast on. But gosh, it's going to be awesome being here for the whole warm up. So let's get on with this part.
As long as we're thanking people, I just want everyone to notice what Laurel put together here for us. A little altar to Richard and his beloved flowers. I'm mostly just going to tell stories. Richard, whatever he loved with a passion. And there were so many things. When I think about it, it's like the five senses. He loved so many things that he tasted. He loved so many things that he looked at. He loved so much music. He could hear his hearing. And he also was incredible with his touch. And that's what I think was the thing that defined his life the most in my mind, was his ability to touch people and make them better. And I think that the thing, he had this desire to see people out of pain. And he would notice. He would notice if your shoulders hurt, and he'd come over and he'd start rubbing them. And this is not when you were in his clinic. And he once told me that he had a client call him that he hadn't seen for years. And he couldn't remember anything about this client other than his name. He couldn't remember what any of his problems were. But he took the appointment, and the client came, and he lay down on the table, and Richard put his hands on the client's back, and he remembered everything. He knew exactly what the problems were and what he had done before and what he needed to do again. And another story about Richard's touch is back in 1996 on May 26th, when it was Susan's birthday, and we were planning to go to the inn on the green. And at that time, we were living in this house, but it didn't look like this. And in the morning, I got stung by a bee when I was working. And I didn't pay any attention to it. I just kept on working. And by midday, I noticed that my arm was hurting me. A little bit later, I couldn't even lift my arm. Then I started feeling nauseous and sick, but at the whole time thinking, it's Susan's birthday. We're going out to the inn. I'm going to get better, and we're going to go. And by the time Susan and Richard got to our house, Paul said, Carol can't go anywhere. And Richard came in, and he said, let me see your arm. And he touched my arm, and he said, I need to sit down, I'm going to faint, which was exactly the way I was feeling. If I hadn't been sitting down, I would have fainted. It was as if he could touch and feel everything that I was feeling. We didn't go out. And he didn't faint. And the other story I want to tell about Richard is that I spent all these years trying to talk him into things that I thought were a good idea. Even at the very end, I'm still trying to get him to go to Soloviev out in New Mexico. I was always trying to talk him into anything, and he would always listen so politely to me. And most of the time it was over dinner. And I would tell him, exactly what I thought, and he'd listen, and he'd smile, and he'd nod his head, and I would think, I'm getting somewhere. And then he would look at me, and he'd smile, and he'd go, no, I'm not doing that. And that was the end of it. So one time, though, I worked really hard on getting him to say that he could grow dahlias, that his season was long enough if he planted them early enough, and he did. So it was my one success. And I know that a lot of other people have been giving him dahlias, receiving dahlias from him, but those very first burgundy-colored dahlias were from here. And I have a poem. Not a poem. Yesterday I received this book for my birthday, the Book of Tea. And I'm going to read you just a little paragraph in this book that reminded me so much of Richard. In joy or sadness, flowers are our constant friends. We eat, drink, sing, dance, and flirt with them. We wed and christen with flowers. We dare not die without them. We have worshipped with the lily. We have meditated with the lotus. We have charged in battle with the rose and the chrysanthemum. We have even attempted to speak in the language of flowers. How could we live without them? It frightens one to conceive of a world bereft of their presence. What solace do they not bring to the bedside of the sick? What a light of bliss to the darkness of weary spirits. Their serene tenderness restores to us our waning confidence in the universe, even as the intent gaze of a beautiful child recalls our lost hopes. When we are laid low in the dust, it is they who linger in sorrow over our graves. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. That was really beautiful. I want to thank everybody here for coming, and I share the sentiments of everybody else who's been up here and been able to tap into and spread some of that light that is Richard's life into a world that seems to be growing darker. I'm going to read a poem that was the last poem that I wrote and shared with Richard. Among many that we would share together, both our own and other guiding lights at every treatment that we shared. I hope it says something about why I felt so compelled to write it, and so really blessed to be able to share it with him, albeit electronically at the time. As most of you know, we go a long way back together. At first, as friends, and through our kids, part of the community of the Steiner School, but soon as brothers and kindred spirits who shared a connection that was, deeper than I can say here in a poem or in words. We're part of an extended family, a chosen family that included all of us and came to include for us also Paul and Carol and the kids. And through those 35 years or more, there were at least two things that served us to deepen our connection and our love for one another. And those were our weekly get-togethers for treatments that were constant every week for all that time, and poetry. And as time went on, more and more those two melded together and became one for me and for us. And this poem is about that union. And also about the only way I knew how to give something back to him of his huge spirit and generosity. And it's called, put on my glasses, Confessions of a Bodywork Freeloader and Poetry Thief. And it starts with an epigraph from a poem by Gary Snyder called I Went Into the Maverick Bar. And it's from his book, Turtle Island. It describes Gary, tucking his hair up under his hat and going into this cowboy bar in New Mexico and checking out the scene with the young bucks and what they were doing and their version of America that he says he could almost love again. And then going back out and thinking to himself as he looked up at the stars, I came back to myself, to the real work, to what is to be done. I never told you the real reason why I'd come, the real work, finding what is to be done in the poetry of the day, a phrase of flowers arranged in your particular language, instructions from the garden, reminders from Hayden and Gary and Lee Poe, but mostly coming back to myself in all the ordinary ways of friendship, bowing routinely to the universe and not knowing why, and knowing, in your hands-on press and unknotting of body and what passes for soul. I must have a dozen Road to Otis poems that have never seen the light of day. Despite a quarter century of drives to your clinic door, a few years more before that, treated family style in your home. Suffice to say, I've observed the Buddha come and go by the wayside, warning signs that made and then made no sense beside the real and phantom heaving ground, where the rubber meets the bump in the road. Log cabin kits risen and occupied by retirees and their dogs. The posted barns, sagging ridge and blown out walls, shored up now a stone's throw from Spectacle Pond, where I've seen the light blue sky reflection come and go, its brood surface green-eyed clear, then blinded by snow, cataracted by the cracking ice. I've noted the hermit's early morning pilgrimage to the cold spring that names the road, buckets in hand and sometimes a nod, because you introduced us once, but he never made it into a poem. Each meeting, another chance, like the story of tea, 3 sips and gone. But living on the road home, a few seeds stolen from your cache taken along, pulling over on the shoulder to add a little water, inoculate with luck's indelible ink, and consign to the dark with nothing but borrowed hope and your tacit blessing that they might actually sprout and return, then as now, your favor. Thanks, Richard.
So I looked at all the beautiful photographs and that incredible series of slides that Carol put together over there, and I was just so profoundly moved by it. Seeing Richard and his family in Italy and all sorts of places that it was just a whole window for me to parts of their lives together that I had heard Richard tell stories about, but had never seen photographs. It's just really, really beautiful. And I've been thinking about the profound effect that Richard had on me in my life. And trying to find a way to describe what the inspiration that he was to me. It was a quiet kind of inspiration. It was never, he never showed me anything or spoke specifically about anything, but when I would come into his studio, it was filled with beauty and life and things that inspired him and meant something to him, whether it was the dahlias that were there when you walked in and the beauty of the way in which he'd put them together, and the books that were sitting on the table out in the room. And I found that I liked to come early because I liked to see what books were there, and they often changed a bit. And there were always ones that I wanted to pick up and look at and read, and I would ask him about them, and he would get so excited that I had noticed, and that I had noticed the dahlias, and that he would play different music while he was doing a treatment, and I would always ask him about people who I didn't know, and he would sometimes even get very sneaky on me and put music on. And when I said, who is that? He would say, "You really want to know? Do you like it?" And I'd say, "Yeah, and he'd say, "It's Pablo." And I had never heard Pablo's music before, and it was so wonderful. And occasionally he would sneak on one of his own recordings and wait and just see if I ask about it. And then often the next time I came, he would have a disc and give me a copy of it. And he was not only a great healer, and he got me through so many serious injuries over the years, but just such a full-on source of inspiration and support in so many ways. And thank you, thank you, Richard, for everything you are and were. And I have 2 poems I want to read. One is a poem by Derek Walcott called Love After Love. The time will come when with elation you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit. Feast on your life. And this is one of Richard's poems that sort of just leaped off the page when I was looking at his book not long ago. It's called Havoc and the Foxgloves in Paradise. We might be caught deaf and blind by a 250-mile-an-hour whirlwind, wreaking havoc in paradise, waking up the state of mind. But let no man nor romance say we missed the foxgloves or fail this fleeting chance to be with friends and share a bowl of blossoming circumstance.
So we've added Dave Fiuczynski on guitar to the backdrop of the reading of Billy Chernikoff's Rhyme for a Green Man. Coming right up.
Really briefly, my name is David Fiuczynski. I don't.
Sorry.
That's okay. I don't believe in.
It's good to meet you.
Good to meet you too. I don't believe in destiny. But wow, was the universe looking over me, watching over me? When I got a playing-related injury, I'm in the process met John Medeski, and in the process I met Richard. So I guess I'm stating the obvious, but I wouldn't be standing right here without Richard. Thank you, wherever you are.
Rhyme for a green man. Did I not say how beautiful you are, were, will ever be, green man, you half-plant? Oak and hawthorn fall from your lips. Are you eating the green world, woodwose? Shaggy king, horned poet, deep-rooted, consort and son of herself. Emerging from the end of time, from nowhere, the dark green of us, secret of the May. From the dances of children, lords and ladies, picnicking half-drunk on sunlight, drunk on shadows, you emerge, the image of our desire to be. You desire of all things to be. The right to be, anarchy, the royal of spring in us, bloodbeat of life and death entwined, the sex of it swelling to welcome the May. Ecstatic eyes turned up like a blind man's to heaven, leaping among us, death and life disguised as each other, the lover, king of the May. Smeared with green and grinning to heaven, strewing your seed on the wet earth, yours this day, yours the power to bless. But we saw you, Peggy and I, after the revels, we saw you return from the Green River, where you'd washed and become yourself again in the cold water, a husband or brother, immortal anyone born from your swim, hair past your shoulders, half naked, a glory, a godly man. We saw you with joy eyes, panic eyes, bewildered by this emergency, as if we'd never seen a man before. Green man, tell me, what is green? A quest for origin, our urgency, roaring, agency, spurting, remedy. We cannot get enough of you, green lion, green medicine rare, though everywhere. When a green man goes away, he goes for a season, for no other reason than ruin, rebirth, reliance. Rely, to trust, to bind yourself to knowing. Know this, you may rely on green, the lust to be, and trust in May. Then you'll see him coming from the river.
Pablo, I've never had the opportunity to be a roadie, so here you go.
Yeah, one of the pedals is unplugged. It's for you, Daddy-O. Daddy-O was a Rolling Stone. Green Garden was his happy home. Oh, you better believe it. 10 toes down, real rock and roll. Wrote his whole life like one big poem. Oh, I think you should read it. 'Cause they don't make them like that no more. Everyone's so intoxicated. Well, they don't know what's going on. Nobody wanna dance no more. But I can still see pops are shaking. This sweet jazzing in his arms. So here's a song, one to carry your song. Well, I've been on, well, just the way that he'd walk. Spread the love, because that's all that we've got. And you know, Pops said you better dance well you can. Well, Daddy-O was a Rolling Stone. His two hands held the pot of gold. That boy was a healer. Ask around, but if you know, you know. Spent his whole life serving young and old. But some would call him the deal. 'Cause they don't make him like that no more. Everyone's just out chasing paper. But they don't give back to the world. And nobody wanna dance no more. But I can still see Pops is shaking. Dancing with those gorgeous girls. Yeah. So here's a song, one to carry your song. Well, I've been on just the way that he'd want. Well, spread the love, because that's all that we've got. And you know, Pops said you better dance where you can. 'Cause these storms are raging. Oh, Lord, out on the raging sea. Woman just keep singing. Oh, yes, I know. That's what he'd say to me. That's what he'd say to me. So here's a song, one to carry your song. Laughing up, just the way that he'd want. We'll spread the love, because that's all that we've got. And you know, Pop said you better dance well you can. So here's a song. Laughing up, or just the way that he'd want. Spread the love, cause that's all that we've got. And you know, Pops said you better dance well you can. It's for you, Daddy-O.
Daddy-O, huh? Boney Oscar. I read this poem the first time and I wanted to have written it. So I'm just going to read it. Anthropoesy, Dragonfly Days. In main lesson today, we learned of the mighty conquest of the great greenness, Lord of all living things, how all things come and go, how love shines from our brow if we have died at least once, and that is the only solution to a world gone mad. In Spanish lesson today, we learn the movement of tongue and lips is attuned to the swing of hips, and how very careful we must be that every word has rhythm. Boney Oscar. In German lesson today, we learn that speech is vibration, is spirit, and we are what we speak. That waltzing is embarrassing at first, but prerequisite for embracing your lover. In mathematics lesson today, we learned that raindrops have no number, and their relationship to each other is arbitrary. Needless to say, to run a store, you must erect an awning composed of triangles and parallelograms. In physical education today, we learned that the stronger and longer our legs become, competition is inescapable, and we must hurdle the walls of hatred. That the more agile and limber our arms become, cooperation is like eating, and we are more able to give. In handwork and woodwork today, we learn that hands and work are synonymous, that time disappears through the window of knit and purl, that space is what is shaved and carved off. In music lesson today, we learned that it is in the air, everywhere, all the time, that it is like flowers, the language of infinity, that we and everything are instruments, and that Ludwig van Beethoven would come to play piano for Joseph Haydn in Haydn's old age. In painting lesson today, we learned how the eye was married to the hand in the tiny chapel in the center of a dandelion blossom. That anguish and desolation are the colors of old, wet, rotting bark. That like poetry, it is pointless not to be clear. And it is not so easy to paint the scent of lilacs in the wind. In Eurythmy lesson today, we learned to celebrate the metamorphosis of words to action, that we must question everything, that what one says and what one does is inseparable, and that there are many ways to boogaloo. In science, extra main lesson today, we learned how vivid and abundant and wild blossoming is in the highest places, how we sit around a pond of knowledge, how we notice at the edge of that pond a shimmering chrysalis. How slowly, steadily the chrysalis molts, unfolds to recognition. How the young dragonfly emerges, teeters on a blade of grass, testing its wings. How bravely, clumsily it tries to lift off, often falling back. But finally, into the meadow. And into the meadow you go. And may the lowest part of the meadow serve you as well as the highest. And may there always be plenty of fresh, organic mosquitoes to eat. And may your wings serve as a bridge to a child's form drawing. Thank you.
I feel like as the sun is moving, people are moving further and further away. But by the time you're over the solar panels, I'll be finished. Because I have got a lot to say about my buddy Richard. And despite all the great words that have come before, and Pablo, you knocked me out, you really did. I'm going to go through this like I planned to go through it. And you know, it was around 92, that's 1992, not 1892, that I think I met Richard. And it happened like this. I was sitting on this porch of this house we just bought up in Beckett, and this man walked by. He didn't know me, and he said, "Do you need help with your back?" And I said, yeah, he didn't know me, I didn't know him. And it was shampoo, this guy's shampoo. And he gave me Richard's number and name, and I called Richard. And I mean, it was like, for years I couldn't stand, if I sat down, I couldn't stand up straight for about 20 minutes. From years of sitting at desk and riding on planes and trains. So I began to see Richard, and a miracle happened, a real miracle. I saw him regularly, and within a few months I was better. But I went on for years and years of treatment. But another miracle happened. Richard and I became buddies. This New York business guy and this farmer from Otis, it just kind of like, it made sense, but when you say it, it doesn't make any sense. We became great friends, and I really feel we loved each other. You know, his teacher, Hoshino, said, nothing surpasses the hands. Nothing surpasses the hands. You know, all those years that we knew each other, I never shook his hand, ever. We'd hug each other. Maybe we'd kiss each other, but I never shook his hand. Well, in some of the last days, it was a rainy day. Laurel will remember this. We went out to the garden, and he sat there. And he sat in a chair, I think it was a wheelchair, and he was looking around with his eyes squinted like, you know, Richard could do, looking around at all of his beautiful flowers and plants. And Laurel was next to him with a scissor. And she would go over to a plant and point to that one, and he would nod, and he'd cut it. Then, and on and on and on until she had enough for a bouquet. And then we went into the clinic, which is like a temple for me, from him. Since he's been gone, it's where I really feel him when I go there. So we went in there, and we went to the very room and the very table that he had worked on me maybe 1,000 times. And he lay down in the table. And for the first time, I grabbed his hand. never having held his hand before, never having shaken his hand before. And the most amazing thing happened. It was, I can't even, the power and energy that came from his arm to hand, to my hand to arm to heart, it was unbelievable. I was overwhelmed with feeling. There could never be a conversation that I could have with him, a goodbye conversation I could have with him that would have transferred so much feeling, and I don't know what else it was. And there we sat. I held his hand while he was on the table for 20 minutes or so. I think he looked up once, and Laurel was saying, "Does that look okay?" And he nodded that. But otherwise he was resting comfortably, and I held his hand, and the feeling was unbelievable. Well, 20 minutes went by, or maybe it was an hour. I don't know. It could have been a day. And I slipped my hand away from his, and he opened his eyes, and he said, "What are you doing? You broke it." And then he smiled and laughed. And it was amazing, an amazing moment that I could not have had a conversation with him that did more, and that was another miracle. So there's a lot of miracles involved with him. And just wanted to mention to you and the people out in the field that I was sitting with Susan and Richard and Laurel and Sarah and Pablo, I think one day years ago. I used to come up and drop off wine for Richard, and I was saying, I hate my name, Bob. I mean, it's like, I feel creative, and I'm Bob. It's like, why? And so they sat around, and I don't know who came up with it, Susan. I think it was Richard. So anyway, I became Bobet, and with an accent on the E. And now, and by the way, everybody in this group and a lot of other people in the Berkshires call me that, as opposed to like in, my family, Robert or Bob. But anyway, so he gave me almost more than my parents did. He renamed me a name. Now I feel I can be creative. In any way, he would come to my apartment in New York once a month for many years. He took a hiatus once, but let's call it 20 years, whatever it was, 10 years, I can't remember. He would come when he worked in the city, and we would go out to dinner at El Buco, or there was a time that I didn't go, and he would come at 11 o'clock on the dot. I would hear his keys, his very own keys to my apartment. He would come in, and we would sit and talk for a while and maybe watch the end of the game, the playoff game or whatever it is, and he would go to bed. And I couldn't wait for the next morning because he would leave really early, and I would get up later, and there would always be a note, and just a thank you note. There were all these little things. They were all over the house. They still are. Susan, I can't find them all. They're all over the place, and I wanted to share some of them because he could have just said, "Hey, thanks, brother," and that was it. But no, every single third week he showed up, and I'll give you an example, and I have 50 of these somewhere. And just to point back to, I think somebody mentioned before, I think it was it in Richard's poem? I don't know, Brunello and Baby Rollo. But as I knew it, Richard gave, we had affectionate names for each other, and besides Bobet, and he always called me Brunello, and he was Baby Rollo. And so all of these notes are written from Baby Rollo to Brunello, and they're short, they're just thank you notes, but it shows you what kind of a person, what kind of an amazing person will leave a note like some of these. I'll try not to read too many of them. Brunello, this hideaway from the hilarity of the city is as blessed as the hills of home. Good sleep is a precious gift, especially after toiling in the tenderness torn world. Stretch on, brother, Baby Rollo. And every week there'd be another one of these things. Dearest Brunello, the song of the frozen mystery, like sirens from Ulysses' shores, is calling, meadows, mountains, or molehills. Well, call them what you will. I'll see you there, maybe, with those old gals from Montalcino, Piedmonte, or Bordeaux. Who knows? Affectionately, Baby Rollo. Brunello. Dawn brightens these tenements with the newborn garage truck chirping. I sense something rising even among the asphalt. Some dream of the steamy summer streets, smell of piss, but no terror. Still rubbing my eyes, love, Baby Rollo. And that there's one more here. I mean, this is unbelievable. Brunello, shelter from the elements, that's what bros are for. And tea on top, what a treat. No tricks this time, but do have fun in the sun. We were headed to the Caribbean. And don't let Lilo get lost at the casinos. See you back where the true light abides. It'll be bone barren but true. So that's the kind of years went by and all that stuff, and it was amazing. And in 1995, I know that because it says 1995 on this paper, he wrote a poem, and I don't know why I have it. It's in his handwriting, and I think in 1995 he gave it to me to read today, and I don't know if it's in any of his books or any of his papers, but I feel that he, God bless you, I feel that he would want me to read this, and he gave this to me to read. It's called The Song of Summer Solstice, June 17th, 1995. If the garden could be my last home, and the summer the only season, fruit and leaf would feed my soul, and the great procession of bloom would be my final masterpiece.
Thank you all for being here. My name is John Medeski. We're all here because Richard Zukowski, Boney Oscar, the Green Man, changed our lives. You know, I think I met him about 37 years ago when I couldn't play, and like many of us, he fixed me up, and I've been playing ever since. And towards the end there, I was talking to him and I was expressing this to him. Thank you for everything, all the gifts, all the things we've been talking about, the plants, the words, the healing. And I got a little choked up. And he looked over me with this funny look. And he said to me, this could be a celebration. So, I thought about that. It can be. So that's what this is, And we're going to play some music now, as we did many nights in their living room for hours and hours. And I don't know, I guess you probably all know this, but Richard loved to dance. So we're going to just hang out here and play some music for a while. And it'd be great if you guys moved a little, and if you want to sing along. Amy Helm is going to join us, and Julia Gottlieb as well. We have Billy Martin here on the drums, Rivard on the bass, Dave Fiuczynski on the guitar, all of us able to play because because of Richard. So we're grateful for that. I want to read a poem that Richard used to read when we'd play with Club Delph. We'd always rock into something right after it. And it has sort of something that's become a mantra for all of us. I think you'll recognize which line that is. Down in the hole. Speaking of flamingo pouring, some previous year's harvest, there's Miriam, so sweet and black, who says, New York is like a man. But what she really means is the world survives on tenderness. Then this plant walks by on high heels with legs, no philodendron, reminding us of mortality and we better dance while we can. Flaming maples in October winds. No wonder the gods were jealous, obsessed with immortality, because life is precious. Shaman of the contracted selves, in your hilarious healing. Red ladybug constellations on the sad ceiling of our sins. These are days of honest omens, and we'd better dance while we can. You work like a Highland beaver to get that black radish to taste sweet, as Miriam pouring autumn fresh and eager as the new moon in delirious afternoons to draw a curtain on the night, though still a bit of bitterness. Your medicinal reality is your own pharmacology, farm ecology, and we'd better dance while we can. We're all addicts in varied styles, hooked on one thing or another. For me, it's black Spanish leather pouring into November, the last remnants of abundance, till all about is nakedness, no masks and no obscurities, till tenderness is what remains. Sweet Miriam in the darkness, and we'd better dance while we can. Confess, confess, confess and stretch into the sun. Bare your mortal tender chest. Only now is our precious chance. No wonder the gods were bored with no edges to ride upon. Miriam asks in the night, is there anything else you want? Bittersweet radish, Spanish wine, a winter full of tenderness. And we better dance while we can.
I just have to say one thing. Last gig that Richard came to, he said, I was on the table and he said, I meet Julia. What's the deal with your green water bottle on stage? And I realize I have it. It's right here with me. He told me never to do that again. So anyway, here's to you, Richard.
So you rescue me?
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Is that simple? You got it, Mike.
I want to thank Susan and the whole family for inviting me to be here today and to be part of celebrating such an extraordinary person. It's an honor to be here and sing a little bit and be with you all. Thank you.
Been gone for so long, I had to be so strong. Sometimes I
I'm just happy to be singing at all. It's the first time I've sang in such an incredible. Let's do good news. Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. Baby's coming home tomorrow. Ain't that good news? Yeah, ain't that news? My baby is coming home tomorrow. Ain't that news? Yeah, ain't that news? I got a letter just the other day telling me he was on his way. Yeah, he wants me to meet him at the station. Ain't that good news? Yeah. Told me he loved me. Ain't that good news? Ain't that news? In the letter he told me he loved me. Ain't that news? Yeah, ain't that news? That he's sorry that he left. Yeah, he found out he don't want nobody else. Oh yeah, he wants me all to himself. Ain't that good news? Yeah, ain't that news? Good news. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, my baby's coming home tomorrow. Ain't that good news? Yeah, ain't that